Being a chartered manager means that you are a specialist in that area, and it means you've got all the skills to do the job to the best of its ability.
You are seen as a leader, a true leader who has credentials behind the great work you've already been doing.
It's enhanced my understanding, it's enhanced my skill set, it's improved my mindset.
It makes all the difference.
This session is recorded and will be available on the CMI website and YouTube channel. Join the conversation by using the live chat box for your questions and comments. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A.
Hello and welcome to this Chartered Management Consultant Masterclass. I'm Matt Roberts. I'm the Director at CMI with responsibility for ChMC, a new chartership that we introduced in partnership with the Management Consultancies Association just 5 years ago. I'm really hopeful that today you'll find out a huge amount of information from people who have just been through the process of becoming chartered and picking up some really useful hints and tips from them along the way. So I'm delighted to introduce three guests today that are going to give us those insights that I mentioned. Firstly, Andy Bayliss, Senior Consultant at Whitetree. Secondly, Shane McDonald, Senior Consultant at Arup. And then finally, Ryan Warren, Partner at Define. Guys, thank you very much for giving us your time today and joining us.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
Good stuff. So I'm going to fire a number of questions at our guests in a moment or two so that we can learn a little bit more about their experience of becoming chartered management consultants. I hope that you'll pick up a lot of useful help along the way from the conversation, but you may have more specific questions that you wish to ask our guests. If that's the case, then don't hesitate to type your question into the chat and we'll take as many of those questions as we can towards the latter part of the session. But look, I think all of you have recently become chartered. So September and October were the timings that you got your results. Congratulations, first and foremost, on that achievement. I'm really looking forward to hearing from each of you about how you found the process. But I'd like to start really with just a thought from each of you and what it means to you to have become a chartered management consultant. And Andy, perhaps we can start with you on your thoughts on that question, please.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. For me, it's quite simple. It's a way of having something physical to point to that reinforces what your CV would show by reading it all, but it's just like a bullet point, bang. Yes, he can do all of these things. He has this breadth of experience and skill set that is of use to a company that might be looking to bring you in.
Excellent, thank you. And Ryan, what about yourself?
Thanks, Matt. I think the most important part here, at least for me, was to demonstrate sort of personal excellence and an alignment to a very important set of competencies. I think as a leader in the industry, it's important that we align to the very highest standards, and we also demonstrate that to our clients. So I think for me, it was those two aspects that were important.
Fab. Shane, what about you?
Yeah, I'd say becoming chartered matters to me for, I guess, two reasons. Similar to Ryan, kind of formally recognizes the level that, I've been operating at in terms of leading change or managing risk or building those kind of trusted client relationships that really deliver measurable results. But then also, I guess, something that really matters to me as well is that it actually connects me to you guys, like to this community of peers who kind of share the same standards as well of these, excellence and ethics and so on.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's a growing community. So recently we celebrated our 2000th Chartered Management Consultant, although we're already way past that landmark. And I think probably towards the middle of March, we'll reach 2,500. So a community that's growing all of the time. And that's thanks to support from right across the consulting industry and particularly to the three firms that you're involved with. Look, I'm conscious that those that are watching today, maybe at different stages of their journey and understanding around chartered management consultant. Some of you that are viewing may well be already in the process and about to complete your submission. Others might be sort of dipping their toe in the water and finding out a little bit more information about what this is. Hopefully, the conversation that we'll have will help to make things really clear for you. But in essence, the process involves a couple of stages. Once you hold the relevant experience in order to become a chartered consultant. And those stages are really a written application that is reviewed by one of our assessor panel. All of our assessors are management consultants themselves who've also gone through the chartership assessment. And providing that written application meets the criteria, you'll then be invited for a professional discussion, which takes place virtually, and we'll learn a little bit more about that as our conversation flows. So perhaps we can start by just thinking a little bit about how did you go about preparing for the assessment process itself? And Shane, I'm going to come to you first this time, please.
Sure. So I guess, like as you mentioned there, the assessment itself is kind of split into two parts. So that's actually how I approached the preparation itself, like in those two parts. So the written submission and then the discussion element. But probably the most valuable thing I did was really tap into my colleagues who had completed the process in the previous 12 months, because they were able to kind of share examples or pitfalls or kind of how to interpret the competency framework in a way that I guess really accelerated my preparation. So I guess I started out by, mapping my strongest project examples and kind of matching them to these competencies in the framework. And then from there, I kind of gathered the evidence and, really aligned it with the language that's kind of put in those documents, and kind of, asked my colleagues to, check my work and see, like, are these examples demonstrating the level expected, like from their own experience of going through it. And then I also, I guess from a preparation point of view, I didn't write the whole submission in one go. I guess I kind of blocked out little chunks throughout my week to do it over the span of a couple of weeks, just to work on it more gradually as opposed to kind of rushing it all at once.
Fantastic. Thanks, Shane. There's a number of key points that you've sort of drawn out there. One of the things you've mentioned is the competency framework, which is the set of standards, if you like, that defines what good looks like at various stages of a consulting career, including defining when somebody's ready to be assessed for chartership. For those that are watching, those standards are available on the CMI website under the Chartered Management Consultant section. So do feel free to take a look at that if you've not yet had a chance to familiarise yourself. Shane, you also mentioned, one of the benefits for you was being able to talk to colleagues who'd gone through the process before. I'm just conscious that in a number of scenarios that may not be possible for everyone. So I know, for example, Ryan, you were the first person within your organisation to go through the assessment process. One of the things that we do provide is online guidance that all applicants have access to once they're preparing for their assessment. And very deliberately, we're putting in there sort of case study videos, from others that have been through. So whether you're in a similar position to Ryan as a sort of early person to go through the process within your firm, or perhaps you're an independent consultant and don't have the benefit of colleagues to tap into on this, you can still access that sort of prior sort of understanding of the process through the guidance that we provide. But Ryan, what about you? How did you prepare?
I mean, sounds strange, but I actually started with these masterclasses. These were incredibly useful to begin to understand the individual approaches that people took. So I did it together with two other colleagues in the office, and we watched a number of these masterclasses together and took away some feedback, and then we individually reviewed the competency framework as a first sort of step. And I think there, the firms within the MCA, I think, are very clear in how they operate their business in alignment with this framework. But again, it was really important to, really distill that information and then be able to link that to tangible outcomes that you delivered to clients. So once we had a really good understanding of this framework, we then, got down into the nuts and bolts and actually tried to understand what clients and what work would be demonstrable and experience and expertise around these different points. And that was probably the most enjoyable part for me. Being in consulting for a long time, you don't realize how much you've been involved in. And that, brought up a lot of fantastic memories, in constructing this assessment proposal. So once we had that, we actually took a lot longer to go through the process. So I would say we've probably been doing it for the last 4 months. And we would write a section and then we would peer review. So I would have my section be read by another colleague, and again, this is someone else who's submitting. But I think we each found areas in each other's work that we needed to improve, or at least illuminate. Oh, okay, that's a really good point. I need to think about that in the context of my submission. So we just learned this together as a group, and I think that was really helpful. But I think, Shane, your points on learning from others who've done it before, I think we will certainly utilize that going forward. But having a group do it and a number of colleagues do it together, I think was really helpful for all of us to really embed that framework and distill our information together.
Sure, thank you. Andy, how did you find it?
Yeah, my experience was quite the opposite of the other two guys on the call here. I was very busy with actual client work at the time, and mine did get compressed into a small period of time of the just blocking out time and working on it non-stop through. Disadvantages and advantages with that, obviously, when something is in your mind and you just carry on that train of thought, it makes it easier to flow through. Very much like Ryan, it's I think that evidence there would be covered by this bit of work I did here. So there's a lot of digging back into CVs and personal development records of when this took place and refreshing your memory actually what you did, and just putting a little note against each of the things associated with the framework, as you said there, for your gold standard of what the question had to be answered with. And then it was probably the more difficult thing for me as well is making sure there was no repetition, trying to give a fresh task and a fresh example for each of the competencies rather than saying the one job did the whole lot. Mm-hmm. In some respect, yes, it might be, but that's kind of defeating the point as well. You're trying to show your breadth of experience, not the fact you can hit the bullet points. So trying to give different jobs, different angles on the questions as they went through. So yeah, mine was a blitz job, mainly solo. So it is, people listening, it is very possible. You don't need the support framework. You need the correct motivation. Time was my correct motivation because I was busy. But yeah, that's a great work as well. But if you can work with other people and fire ideas around people, that would be the ideal, I would suggest. But it is not the be all and end all. There are alternatives.
Great. So, I mean, I think what we're hearing there is that, there's certainly more than one approach to this, as the guys have just outlined there for us. I think one of the key points is being able to, allocate appropriate time, whether that's in a very concentrated period as per Andy, or the opposite end of the spectrum, Ryan, sort of taking a much longer period with dipping in and out of it, and Shane somewhere in the middle. The commitment of time, though, nevertheless, is absolutely essential, to making sure you do yourself justice with that initial written application. Just in terms of that written piece, I'm really keen just to understand a little bit more in depth, perhaps, about, I don't know, what the biggest challenges were in terms of the written piece. Ryan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge, and Andy alluded to there, was to try and find examples that really resonated that competency strongly, or how you've employed that particular element of the framework. And there's always lots of different examples. And I think as a consultant, you've got lots of stories, some really great stories, other challenges. And I tried to, think about not just all the, the beautiful, wonderful things, but also think about those really hard projects that could also, showcase other elements of your personality and how they link to those competencies. So it does take it's a long trip down memory lane. And, I actually chatted to some other colleagues who might have different memories of that project, so we could, think about that together. So there was quite a lot of background work, I would say, to try and make sure that you pay appropriate due diligence to finding good examples that cover a broad range and really make sure that you cover those competencies well.
I see. Yeah. What about you, Andy? You're in the thick of this sort of very concentrated period of smashing through the written assessment. How did you? Well, what were the biggest challenges that you found?
The word count is a challenge, definitely. Why use one word when 100 will do? But that's a very good mental exercise in itself of honing and rehoning it without it losing the message. I think we've all spoken before. You want to make sure you've got that point absolutely 100% covered. And so your tendency is to give 2 or 3 examples or expand more than it needs to be. So applying that degree of brevity into your application is quite hard. And without Word doing the count for me constantly for each section to make sure I was there, just to make sure I didn't trip over something so basic and so simple, was quite a challenge for me. But then tying it all in, and as I've touched on before, making it flow without it sounding repetitive at all as well. I mean, I don't want to bore your assessor when you start off, and I'm figuring that's not a great place to start there. So you try and make it a story, not just a few dry facts. So the biggest challenge, but also probably the most enjoyable part of the process for me.
Very good. And I think that that piece around brevity and keeping things succinct is actually quite deliberate, in terms of the way in which the assessment has been set up. And many chartered consultants coming through the process tell us that, they're always being asked to make sure that they're succinct in their daily professional life in terms of getting messages across clearly, but without, excess sort of words, etc., and real clarity. So in a way that that need for brevity is testing that discipline, I guess. What about yourself, Shane? How did you find the challenges of the written application?
Yeah, I'd actually completely echo what Andy mentioned there. I think for me, the hardest part was kind of striking that right balance between being detailed, but also being concise, because some the project examples that I included were actually quite long-term projects that had a lot of elements within them. So you're trying to show, strategic thinking, delivery, governance, client management, commercial awareness, all of these things, but you only have that limited word count. So yeah, as Andy said, it's a really good exercise in itself. And I guess one way I went about it, again, was just talking to colleagues who had gone through the chartership process recently, and they really kind of helped me work out how much detail was enough. So they kind of showed me, I guess, how to anchor each example in the impact and the outcome you're having, and not just like a list of activities that you did like as part of that project. So I think once I made that shift, or once I realized that, focusing on what changed because of my work, I think it became much easier then to kind of be really like clear in terms of my answer and keep it within that word count. But I did go right to the limit in terms of that word count. I think I was within like 10 words.
Excellent. Good stuff. So look, great insights there from all three of you. Thank you, in terms of how to approach the assessment and some of the key challenges involved around that written piece. So once you've submitted the written application to CMI, one of the assessment team will take a look through the submission, and essentially they're marking that against a set of criteria that relate to the competency framework that was mentioned earlier on. Now, there's 2 potential outcomes at that stage. One is that what you've provided meets all of the criteria. So fantastic. You're then moving through to the next stage of the process, which is the professional discussion that we alluded to earlier, and we'll come on to talk about in more detail. The second outcome is that you may not have done justice to yourself against all of the criteria that we're looking at. And so the assessor may refer your submission back to you to give you the opportunity to enhance it a little bit, just to make sure that you've got a second opportunity to come forward with a more compelling submission. So applicants get that second chance to meet the criteria in terms of the written assessment. And in the vast majority of cases where that happens, people then do resubmit with the full information that's required and move on to the professional discussion. If at the second assessment, though, it still didn't meet the criteria, that is where the applicant would drop out of the process for now. They'd effectively fail the process at this stage. And then they can come back and reapply in the future when perhaps they're in a better position to meet the criteria. But let's go with the more positive sort of outcome from the written submission, and that's the experience that all of you had. So having sort of had that sort of initial run through, the assessor has decided, yep, this person's ready to move forward to the professional discussion. They'll get in touch directly with you as the applicant to identify a suitable time and get that booked into the diary for a virtual call to have that discussion. So this is the sort of second and final part of the process for applicants. So again, keen to sort of hear your thoughts on sort of the challenges around the professional discussion. So Andy, how did you find it?
I'm weird. I really enjoyed it. I think your statement there about it being a professional discussion is exactly the level it's pitched at. It's not like some sort of panel interview sort of thing with a spotlight on you glaring. It's you're engaged in a conversation of talking about things, very much a two-way street. And I found it really enjoyable right from the early days of the initial communications with John, with the when can you do, where can it work, I can't do this bit, how about this bit here, the easing the process so that was no stress at all for anyone that might be slightly more nervous about it. That setting people's minds at rest early was I didn't need it particularly. I'm very obtuse, but I could see where it'd be very useful for some people. But the discussion itself was brilliant. A good discussion. You're sat at the seat because you deserve to be sitting at the seat. You remember that, and you talk about yourself. You bring it the colour to the dry text that you've given in the written assessment. So if you're confident enough in your abilities, you should have no problems with it. Just shine like you deserve to for being there.
Fab, thank you, Andy. That's great to hear. I mean, particularly just to really underscore what you said there, Andy, what we're trying to do with the professional discussion is to ensure that it takes place in an environment where each applicant is really enabled to thrive and to showcase the best of their achievements and so forth. So glad to hear that you clearly had that experience. Shane, what about yourself? How did you find the professional discussion, and any tips on how you prepare for it?
Sure. I mean, like, in terms of setting up the professional discussion, I just want to say, my assessor was really accommodating in terms of finding a time and date that also suited me, because I happened to be on leave around that time as well. So setting that up was really seamless. And one thing I also appreciated was my assessor, I guess, guided the conversation and kind of gave me an insight into what's to come over that hour or an hour and a half ahead. So they said, okay, as you know, the competencies are A, B, C, D, E, and we're going to start with ethics, for example. So I think within that, in terms of preparing, I guess I practiced a lot myself, and especially around the pacing part of it, because I didn't want to go too deep into one topic and maybe run out of time on others. Because, as I said, like, the assessors really guide that conversation, but you need to give very structured, concise answers. So what I tried to do was kind of prepare my answers in a way to treat them as if they're like mini stories. So having the context of the case study or the project, what I did specifically in that, the measurable impact, keeping that simple structure in my head kind of really helped me stay focused and not ramble. And one thing as well that he brought up is, like, make sure you always say I, like, I did this, I did that, we. So that's something that I'll never forget. It was it's all about you, and as Andy said, you deserve to be there. So kind of highlight that.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that you've just highlighted in terms of the importance of I in this situation. So, a lot of time, probably the majority of time in our professional lives, we're talking about how we work as a team and how we collaborate and so forth, and all the very positive things that come from that. But you're right, Shane, this is absolutely a process that's designed to understand about you as an individual and your contributions, your impact. So I think that's a really important point that you raised there. Ryan, one of the things that we hear quite commonly actually from people that go through the professional discussion is that chance just to reflect on their previous achievements and actually bring that to life with this kind of conversation. It's actually quite rare in our working lives, and quite often has got some real benefit to it in terms of perhaps a level of self-confidence that can emerge from that, maybe a bit of focus on what you want to do next. But I don't know whether that was the experience for you, but interested to hear if so, and also your general reflections on the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this process has been wonderful for myself to look back at, my own achievements and how I've actually, my perception of a career in consulting, when I started 15 years ago to what it is now is very different. And that was shaped by, the collaborations and friendships that I've developed across the industry and with clients. And I think telling some of these stories, and many of these came out actually within the professional discussion. I think the examiner or the discussion partner was very good at picking up on some of these aspects, because whilst there is this competency framework, there's a lot of soft skills around this. And this is something I think that makes consultancy, it can be a difficult business. We have to be technically very adept, but also there's the soft skills that you need to manage relationships and work through projects together. So I think that really helped to illuminate that. I mean, on the challenges side, Matt, I think the one piece of advice I'd give, and I think this probably, I realized after the call, was just having a lot of examples that on each of these elements. And of course, as Andy said, we're an expert on our profile, we know ourselves the best. So I think you're able to provide a lot of information on those pieces and your submission. But sometimes you have so many, you have a lot of examples on certain areas that I think coming into the professional discussion, in addition to your written piece, it's helpful to go through the framework and just have in mind some real tangible examples and impacts for each of these items should they come up. And it just helps you be even more prepared for some of those pieces, because there's a lot to go through. And I think it's just helpful to get your mindset in the right place by having these examples in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you. Well, good to get all of your views on that professional discussion. And again, the guidance that I mentioned earlier on that's available online once you're registered to go through the assessment includes a couple of videos featuring our assessors and some of the key things that they're looking for from the process as well. So alongside this session, and there's a back catalogue of previous masterclasses, as Ryan referred to, that he'd used previously. I'd recommend you take a look at that video of the assessors. I've got a couple more questions that I'm going to throw at our guests in a moment or two, but just for those of you that are watching live, if you've got a question that you'd like to ask the group, then please don't hesitate to add that into the chat, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. So some of you have alluded to this in a variety of ways, but each of you have got specialist areas, in terms of your day jobs and the areas that you really sort of thrive within. I'm just keen to understand, did you use any particular techniques to almost try and elevate yourself away from the specialism into the broader consulting context? Any techniques that you use to position yourself in that way? Andy, perhaps you can give us any thoughts that you might have on that.
Yeah, I suppose mine is a complete opposite to where you're saying about it all being about the I for the exam. I've always been about the we with regards to a team sort of thing. First of all, as a member of a team, and then as a team leader. The team is everything to me. I've developed my team leading skills. And then the communication both up and down the ladder of shielding the team from the bad stuff and then promoting the good stuff up the line, acting as that conduit of information, but keeping it open and honest and supportive of the team. So I think the communication skills that developed from being on the ground doing all that sort of thing, and then getting used to the fact you're talking more to senior management and that sort of thing, but still being able to talk to the shop floor, treating everyone equally on that side of there with the communications, I think is a key part of being a consultant. You have to be able to talk to whoever is in front of you that needs talking to, be it positive, negative, technical, emotional, whatever. I think that's the key difference between a consultant sitting outside of an organization with a view over all of it, compared to someone as part of an organizational tree, and maybe a more rigid structure is they talk to the person below them, they get talked to by the person above them. That broader purview and license to communicate, I think, would be the most valuable part for me.
Great, thanks, Andy. Ryan, any builds on what Andy's just said?
I think part of this is about, I guess, look, everyone knows what your sort of technical abilities are, but it's then all the adjacent competencies next to that I think have this framework really illuminates. So if you are someone that's a programmer and working on software development, then there's the change management. There's all these frameworks that exist as complementary competencies around this. And I think the sooner that everyone is aware of that, the more you can develop. And I think this has been helpful to me to understand that broader context. And of course, you see that within your career. But for anyone who's earlier on in their career doing this, this framework really helps. And I think it's really important to get the bigger picture, no matter what work you do, to broaden your skill sets and have a deeper understanding of the impact that you make at a client.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Fantastic. Shane, anything you'd like to add on that point?
Yeah, I mean, as the guys have mentioned, I think it can be easy to kind of be pulled into the technical side of your specialty, but it's just about really reframing everything you do through that management consulting lens. So yeah, even if you have a technical job, you can be thinking about, okay, how did I shape the strategy, like through this example, or how did I manage stakeholders? How did I communicate and lead teams? Or like, how did I manage conflict? Like if these things arose, how did I influence decisions? So like, even though you might be extremely technical, it's about highlighting those adjacent skills, as Ryan mentioned as well. So yeah, I guess that shift in framing makes a huge difference in how you would kind of approach the professional discussion as well, and I guess your answers as well.
Mm-hmm. Great stuff. Okay, we're going to come to audience questions in a moment, but before we do, one last question from me, and I guess it's really with the benefit of hindsight, having gone through the process, having successfully achieved your respective charterships, is there anything that you now know that you wish you knew at the start of the process and that you could share with our viewers? Shane, any thoughts on that one?
Well, I guess, like as I kind of spoke about in the beginning, if you do have the opportunity to leverage colleagues early, I think, they can be a huge help in terms of sharing their templates, their examples, their stories. Depending on, how you are as a person as well, practicing your answers out loud can be a big help. In my experience, my assessor was really nice. He put me at ease, very calm, collected person. So, no kind of issues in terms of that. But I guess just practicing also in advance kind of helps you stay crisp and confident during the professional discussion as well.
Fab, thank you. Andy?
For me, on a very personal note, is engage your sponsor early with the statement that they have to provide for it as well. You are personally invested in completing this paperwork. Yes, your sponsor will want you to succeed, but they're busy people as well, and it may not be in their number one priority. So not through any hidden meaning of that, but give them plenty of time. Mention it regularly to them without bugging them, but also when you get your sponsor statement, that's quite a good guideline for the sort of level that they think you are and the sort of level to pitch your answers against the rest of the framework. So yeah, talk to your sponsor. Don't leave that don't wait till you're finished before you get his or her bit done.
That's a really good point, Andy. And yeah, just for the benefit of those that are not yet fully familiar with the process, everybody that applies to become a chartered management consultant will be asked to provide details of a sponsor who can effectively vouch for you as an applicant in terms of the things that you're mentioning that you've achieved through your career. So that could be a colleague, a line manager, or in the case of quite a lot of our independent consultants that come through where there isn't that kind of network available, it could be a client or a peer consultant. Ryan, any sort of benefit of hindsight top tips that you can enlighten the audience with?
I think actually, reflecting back on the process, the one thing I probably wouldn't change, so I'll flip your question a little bit, is actually the benefit of having that additional time. And maybe there was a piece there where we didn't have colleagues to bounce ideas off who had done it before. But actually, looking back, having the time to think about it together as a team and also put the I in it. And I think Shane, a fantastic point about the we and I. Sometimes it can be quite hard to point it always to yourself and say I. But I think there it's easy to reflect on the team dynamic, and it takes a bit of time to refocus that on, okay, what was my impulse there? What was I doing? So I think, how I would take this further into the team and other colleagues doing it next year is that, let's allow a bit more time where you don't feel that you need to compress all this thinking into a small time period. Use this as an experience, quite a cathartic experience to understand what impact and value you've taken away, but also how they can shape the future a little bit. There's so many learnings that I'm going to take forward from this, and that needed a bit of time, at least for me, to distill. So I think actually that in hindsight, I'm happy that we actually had that longer period.
Fabulous, thank you. Good stuff. So look, we'll take some questions from our audience. We've had a number of questions that people have sent through ahead of today's webinar, so we'll come to those, and I can see that live questions are starting to appear through the chat. If you've got questions, don't hesitate to submit them. We've got time to come to your question today. The first question that we had ahead of the session today came from Shanti, and Shanti asked, what's the difference between CMI and ChMC? Are they one and the same? I'll quickly cover that one. So CMI, Chartered Management Institute, is the organisation that has the permission from the Privy Council to award chartership for management consultants. So if you like, we are the awarding organisation for ChMC. We developed the standards and the processes with our partners at the Management Consultancies Association. But yeah, CMI is the awarding organisation. So we offer chartered management consultant as part of the activities that we undertake at CMI. Hope that makes that clear for you, Shanti. We've also had a question from Ruth, which is really regarding the typical time period between submitting the written application and then the professional discussion happening, and how much notice are we given to prepare. So hopefully some of the discussion earlier helped you to understand, Ruth, that we're pretty flexible around making sure that diaries coordinate well and so forth. But be interesting just to hear if you can remember, guys, what the sort of time lag from initially submitting your written application to when you heard from the assessor about moving things forward into the discussion was. I don't know, Andy, if you can recall roughly the sort of time span there.
I mean, I blow my own trumpet here, but mine was obviously exceptional. John got to it quite quickly afterwards, but so within a week, I would say I'd heard back and ready to move on. And then, as you touched on there, it was how does it fit in with people's calendars and busy program in the summer as well, people on holidays, that's what. But I think mine was about 3 weeks after that. So within a month of submitting, I would say I was having my assessment with John. But that was purely what worked best for the both of us. That's not a set in stone. That is the time it will take.
Sure. Ryan, similarly for you, what was your experience there?
Yeah, so I think the turnaround was a month from essentially submitting the written to having been assessed and receiving the chartership award. So I heard back within a couple of days on the assessment, so maybe 4 or 5 days. And then, as Andy said, there's lots of busy schedules out there, and they were fantastic in terms of finding the right time where it's not squashed between other meetings, so that you're in the right headspace to actually, give of you all in that meeting. So after that, it was then very quick, couple of weeks, and everything was done. So definitely the bulk of the work was all done before, and then it was, really, really well orchestrated process to go through the discussion and hopefully have a good result at the end.
Fab. Shane, what about yourself?
Yeah, similar to the guys. I think I submitted over a weekend, and then I had the invitation for the professional discussion by the Friday of the following week. So, around 5 days. And then initially the professional discussion was proposed for around a week and a half later, but I was traveling at that time. So they very kindly allowed me to kind of push it out to about 3 weeks after that. So yeah, it was really seamless, and no complaints.
Right. Delighted to hear that. So Ruth, hopefully that helps you to sort of understand the experience of our 3 guests today. We do obviously get peaks and troughs of demand on the assessor time, just depending on how many assessments come through, but we're always looking to be as swift as we possibly can. And I think that the experiences you've just heard from Andy, Ryan and Shane are fairly typical of things at the moment. We've also had a question from Samantha, interesting question, and she's asking for our perspectives on, are there any specific benefits to this status if you work within small businesses as opposed to large organisations? I'll throw that open to thoughts from our guests in a moment, but thanks very much for the question, Samantha. One of the things that's absolutely crucial about any chartership is that it is accessible to professionals from right across whatever segment of the economy or society that chartership represents. And obviously management consulting is very varied in terms of scale, specialism. We've got plenty of people that are working for large consultancy firms that are rooted with a history in financial services. We've got technology consulting firms, engineering firms. We've got large and small businesses involved with this, and plenty of independent consultants that are coming through the process. So that sort of inclusivity is an absolutely essential part of chartered management consultant. And I think one of the overt benefits is that everybody that becomes chartered as a management consultant is being assessed against the same competency framework. And so that may well lead to a number of benefits arising as a result of that. But to our guests, I don't know if you've got any particular perspectives on Samantha's question. Keen to hear from you.
I'll go first.
Maybe I can. Please go.
No, go. I insist.
I think from our side, is that we are a small organisation in the UK, and what we wanted to do was differentiate ourselves. We really wanted to, we believed in this framework, we believe in what it stands for, and as a small organisation, we wanted to try and push as many colleagues there to show our alignment and belief in this framework. So for us, it was really establishing ourselves as a differentiating against some of the bigger organisations that they are certainly on this path, but we can do this. We have a smaller number of people, and we can get a number of people through quite quickly given our size. So that was our focus here, and we also we are growing. And I think, we hire a lot of graduates, and if you can establish these competencies very early on in your career and really create visibility for young colleagues on what are the appropriate ethics, what should you think about in building your profile going forward, is really helpful to have that at the start of your career. So this is something, although we're starting embedding it in at a senior level, it's something that we are going to roll out, as early on as we can, when you've got sufficient experience, so that people can carry this framework forward and develop themselves in line with it.
Fabulous, that's great. I'm going to move on from this question because we've got a number of others coming through from our live audience, so I'm keen to focus on some of those questions. So KA, who is live with us today, hi, thank you very much for joining us today. They are asking, how long is the assessment interview approximately? Now, there's a bit of variation there, actually. So we have 2 assessment routes that involve the professional discussion. And one is designed for what we call experienced professionals. And all 3 of our guests went through that route in their assessment. We also have what we call the depth interview assessment route, which again, it's the same competencies that are being assessed, but what we do there is we slightly abbreviate the written element of the assessment, but we extend the professional discussion. But Shane, how long was your professional discussion?
It was advertised as 90 minutes. I guess 90 minutes was booked, but it lasted 60 minutes.
Yeah, good stuff. I'd expect that sort of time. But Andy, any variation to that for you?
Yeah, almost exactly the same. 90 minutes booked in case it was needed. About 65 minutes with a bit of a a preamble before and afterwards as well, padding it out slightly.
Ryan?
Yeah, very similar. Yeah, there was a bit of discussion beforehand and setting the context and expectations for the discussion, and it was about 65 minutes.
Yeah, great. So that's what I'd expect with the experienced professional assessment route. The depth interview that I mentioned a moment ago, those do average around about a 90-minute discussion because of the greater level of scrutiny given the slight abbreviation of the written piece. So I hope that helps, KA. And you've got a follow-up question that you've asked around, are there any requirements to maintain the Chartered Management Consultant certification once achieved? Yes, there are. And that's a really important question. Thanks for raising it. So what we're doing with the assessment process and the experiences that our guests have talked us through today is establishing, obviously, whether somebody meets that chartered criteria. And it's right that we celebrate that. And there's lots of benefits that have come from going through that process, as Shane, Ryan and Andy have all outlined today. But also what we're doing as part of the process is challenging professionals to think about what's next. Where are they going to develop their skills, their professionalism going forward? So as part of the, if you like, the deal of being a chartered professional, you're committing to ongoing CPD. And so within the Chartered Management Consultant community, you're required to undertake and then be able to evidence the CPD activities that you're doing. We can request the evidence of that at any given time. So that's a way of keeping everybody honest around that ongoing development. This isn't just a sort of one-off rubber stamp, you're doing a great job and therefore forevermore you're doing a great job. It's about maintaining that currency of professional impact. And there is a requirement to maintain a membership of CMI as part of this as well, so that at any given time we have an understanding of all of those that currently hold Chartered Management Consultant. And so we keep a professional record of that. So I hope that helps with your question, KA. And I think we've got time for one more, or maybe two more questions. We'll try and squeeze a second one in as well. But T. Alexander, thanks very much for your question. Are there any core differences or tips between the expectation and requirements of A, ChMC, I'll explain that in a moment for everybody's benefit, and ChMC for those on accredited programs? So thanks. Another really good question. I think just to elaborate on a point that Ryan started to introduce a moment ago about early career professionals that are joining Define. Ryan, you mentioned you want to try and embed the sort of competencies and get people working towards being able to demonstrate that they meet those competencies, early on. One of the ways in which we work with consultancy firms, we can look to work together to accredit the way in which development takes place for those in the sort of early stages of their career, and indeed how senior leaders progress. But for those in the early stages, actually, if you take a look at the competency framework, you'll see it's actually split into three different sections. And so across all of the sort of disciplines that are in the framework, we define what we would expect to be a level of excellence at different levels of experience and seniority. And for the A ChMC that this question relates to, that relates to Associate Chartered Management Consultant. And within the competency framework, we have the concept of foundation, applied and chartered levels of competence. And at the applied level, somebody that's on an accredited program with one of our firms can come forward for a associate ChMC assessment, which in a way acts as a bit of a stepping stone midway through that journey towards being ready for the full chartership assessment itself. That journey, you can jump onto that journey at various points actually, but in total it would take a 4-year period of time, and a ChMC is assessed after 2 years. And so yes is the answer to your question. There is a difference. If you take a look at the framework, you'll see that the definition of what good looks like at that applied level is slightly less demanding and reflective of slightly less experience typically of when you get to the full chartered level. I hope that helps with regard to that question. And look, we've got one more question that we've got a chance to squeeze in before we finish. So how do we continue to be associated with the community after the certification? So that comes through the membership that I alluded to a little while ago. So beyond just holding the sort of basic membership, which is around maintaining your professional registration as a chartered management consultant, it is possible to become a full member of CMI, and there are other benefits associated there around sort of networking and so forth. So I hope that helps. Look, we're going to wrap up in a moment, but one last question that I really must pose to our guests today is would you recommend becoming a chartered management consultant to others? Ryan, what's your thoughts on that one?
I mean, yeah, I couldn't recommend it anymore. I think no matter where you are in your career, it's very important to take stock of the trajectory that you have taken to get to where you are and where you're looking forward and how you're going to achieve that. And I think this, having this opportunity to go through this process together with other colleagues, to take stock of what you've achieved, and you can pat yourself on the back with some of the achievements as well that you've got, but also make sure that you're in a continuous state of learning, and we have benchmarks in the industry that we need to adhere to ensure that we give of the very best to our clients. And I think that's always should be front and center, and we always need to reset and make sure we're doing everything in our power to be in alignment to that. So for me, 100% Matt, it's hugely beneficial.
Great. I'm so pleased to hear that. Shane, what about yourself?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think so. Like right now, I'm working for quite a large organization, but my previous job was with a smaller business, like a more boutique consultancy. So I think in smaller businesses, you often wear multiple hats, and that actually maps really well against the chartership competencies. So I think, some of the benefits would be, if you're trying to win work and if you're bidding against maybe larger clients, having that credibility of the chartership, it really signals that kind of recognized standards of consulting excellence. So I think that really helps. And then, as the guys are saying, like just having that clear framework, if you do have junior members joining a team, something that they can kind of reference and then kind of see, okay, these are the types of, I guess, principles I should be adhering to like throughout my work. So yeah, I think the benefits are really strong regardless of, company size. Even in smaller organizations, it might be even more meaningful. So if you're on the fence, I'd say definitely go for it.
Fantastic. Andy, over to you for the last word on this one.
Yeah, I think Shane hit the key word there, credibility. Anyone can call themselves a consultant. Anyone can call themselves an engineer. Anyone can call themselves a pink donut. It doesn't matter. But having something quantifiable to point yourself against, I am at this standard. If you're selling your services to a client and they see the letters after your name, they look it up if they don't know it already. Oh my word, this person can do these sort of things. He has this standard of expertise that is a worthwhile investment to bring him in to help it. So yeah, for me, credibility to your client, and absolutely worthwhile to anyone thinking of doing it.
So there you have it. Full endorsement and recommendation. Andy, Ryan, Shane, look, I just wanted to take one final opportunity to congratulate you on all becoming chartered over recent weeks. And thank you so much for taking the time today for sharing your experiences and your hints and tips. I know that the audience will have massively appreciated it, and I can see some comments coming in with other people congratulating you there too. There's one final question that came in from Mahmood, who's over in Egypt. And yes, Mahmood, you can apply if you're based overseas, and again, all the details are on the website, so please do take a look. But look, I hope that this has been a really useful session for everyone watching. There's more information on the CMI website around how chartership works, and if you'd like to sort of get involved, whether that's for you as an individual or whether you're working in an organization and you're thinking about your team getting chartered, don't hesitate to get in touch. We'd be delighted to work together on that. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don't forget, as a CMI member, you can find the latest management and leadership insights at managers.org.uk. If you're not yet a member, join our community to discover CMI Confidence with on-demand resources, our network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations.